Robinson at Pharma Consulting. I have a question for Dr. Rodriguez. It's very nice to see that FDA has started testing the use of MDRS on the API particle size and morphology testing. Now, with almost 4 years of studying, is the agency ready to allow the industry use comparable or equivalent MDRS test results from the RLD and the test product, and use that result to infer the waiver of in vivo bioequivalence testing for, say, nasal sprays, EPIs, MDIs?
So that's a very complicated question. I didn't expect to get any questions, so I'm happy to get the first question. So as you mentioned, we have done quite a bit of work on MDRS, and I really can't, being from a laboratory perspective, can't comment on or even think about what the review divisions or what the deliberations going on there. But I will say that from a laboratory perspective, one of the things that we do plan on doing for the pharmaceutical industry and for the greater scientific industry is that we have been presenting our results and our studies at conferences, and we'll make those available as well for in the peer review realm. So that's really all that I can mention, not being from the review divisions as well. But I will mention that this is a great area of collaboration between the laboratory and the review divisions, particularly with OGD.
Thank you. Follow-up question.
Let me take an online question.
I thought it was one at a time.
Yeah, you guys, you need to get in line behind yourself. And for those of you in the room, this is the last panel, so take advantage of it. There's 2 microphones. An online question for me, please.
Sure. This is for Robert. With the respect to size and shape requirement, as you mentioned in your presentation, would an increase in capsule size be allowed for a generic soft gelatin capsule product?
I would refer you to the guidance on, I believe the official, we call it the size and shape guidance, but as a size, shape, and I don't know the full name, but please refer to that guidance. It will depend on the size of the RLD as well as the size of the proposed product.
Okay, and our next questioner, please go ahead.
Thank you. This is a full-on question, still for Dr. Rodriguez. So based on years of study and learning of this technology, do you recommend OGD to use this test results of this technology to, say, promote or recognize or accept the approach to replace bioequivalence study, in vivo bioequivalence study?
Well, again, I'm going to give you a non-answer for that as well. And one of the reasons is that from a laboratory perspective, we'd like to stick to, we report, what we see, and that's really when we do these presentations or we disseminate in the public domain these through papers or white papers, which I do expect that we will, have out within the next few months or so. But again, that's something that's taken into account by the review divisions, and I just stay tuned.
Go ahead.
Go online? Okay.
Yep.
Keith again. Question for the OPF speakers, and just wanted to know: does OPF do the facility and process and facility assessments for all processing facilities? That would be APIs, finished products, biologics, devices, the whole gamut.
Yes, the facility reviewer will review the inspection of all the required facilities, including API, drug product, packaging, but I do not believe we ever inspect excipients, container closures. Have I answered your question? Any additional question?
Biologics and devices.
Biologic and device, I think whenever device is involved. Now it's called a combinational product. The device part will be reviewed by CDER, and they have their Office of Compliance to inspect the device site. BJ, do you want to add something?
No, I just agree. In a combination device, CDER wouldn't be held to the expectations to cover the 820s. So it would come from either an experienced ORA investigator or a CDRH reviewer.
I added the biological drug product. Do you mean the drug product under CDER or CBER? CDER, right? If it's under CDER, so that will be reviewed by OBP, Office of Biotechnology Product, and we do cover the inspection of that.
All right, an online question, please.
This one's for Donal. If a DMF is cited by an IND submission which is under PDUFA, is it still subject to a DMF fee for completeness review?
The DMF fee would only apply in the context of GDUFA. There is no DMF equivalent fee for PDUFA.
All right. And the people on this side of the room, did you give all your questions to him? Please step right up to the microphone.
All right. Xiao Bingshen, IDA Pharma Consulting again. This is an inspection question for Dr. Ryan. Your case study indicated that the lyophilization testing or process prompt for PAI inspection for a site that's already deemed acceptable without PAI. Now, does that mean if for a site that is already inspected and deemed acceptable, when they incorporate a new manufacturing process, they will automatically be inspected?
Not automatic that they would be inspected, but you might fall under a priority PAI determination according to our compliance program, but it's not automatic.
Step right up. We'll go ahead and take this.
Hi, this question is on PGI in API. One of our suppliers was asked to evaluate the starting material as a PGI, and they did the Ames test, and it turned out to be positive. So they did the spike study. Although it's a starting material, they did the spike study to at the limit, actually excess of the limit, and took it all the way to the final API and showed that it's below the threshold limit of, in this case, it was 0.3 ppm. But the actual levels in the historical lots were less than 0.1 ppm. So they proposed no spec. And the FDA came back and asked them to add a skip test. Now, so my question is, if they add the skip test, will the ANDA holder needs to also add a test for the ANDA drug substance spec? Or no?
One take this. This will be a. Do they want to test in ANDA?
It's fairly typical for us to request that the ANDA applicant adopt the same specifications as and testing as the DMF holder for a drug substance.
What's the justification for that? Because the API manufacturer already showed that it's not. There's no possibility for it's being above 30% of the TTG limit. So because M7 has certain requirements, they ask us to put a skip test. The skip test means they're going to test every 10th lot a year. And they already showed it's not there. So what's the point of adding a spec in the ANDA spec?
So we're really trying to take a risk-based approach for our assessments. So it's possible that you could submit sufficient batch data to support not including that test. However, We're also, as drug product quality assessors, we are relying heavily on the DMF reviewers to actually establish what testing is necessary for the quality of a drug substance. So if the DMF assessment has determined that in the specification for the drug substance that test is needed, then in order for us to ensure the quality of the finished product, we would probably also require that test to be included in the ANDA applicant's specification.
Not, can I ask?
If it's quick.
Not every CFA is going to have this test or results. So when the ANDA holder receives the API, only if they receive the 10th lot, they would have that. And it's only a risk test, I mean, risk assessment. And
I understand. So I'm sorry I can't give you a
It's- I
definitive
think-
answer,
but-
but I have presented you the logic that would go behind making that
but
decision.
the interesting thing is, there are two forms of the same API, same impurities in both. The other API was approved, and the ANDA holder was not asked to add a skip test. So,
and this is specific enough. I'll defer this one until after the panel wraps up, and you two can have that then. Let me go ahead and move on to an online question, if I could, please.
This question is for Ryan. If all manufacturing parts, such as batch manufacturing records, are reviewed by the process and facility assessor, will it also be reviewed by a drug product assessor? Can both reviews be combined?
The manufacturing batch records, the executed batch records, and the proposed commercial batch records are going to be reviewed by the process reviewer. The drug product reviewer is going to look at the specifications.
Okay. Surprise. Welcome back.
Nobody's asking, so I try to make
no,
it
we
warm.
appreciate it. You've got all the questions from that side of the room. Please go ahead. Turn your
All right.
microphone down a little bit. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, inspection related. Does the agency inspect and hold a novel site to comply with Cdmp for drug substance starting material?
All facilities should be held to CGMPs. A starting material site, we wouldn't necessarily go and inspect it, though.
Wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah. We could go and if there's a reason to believe that we should be there, but we wouldn't necessarily.
I think one of the factors is how close your starting material to the end of API. If you are 20 steps away, probably we consider low risk, we won't go in. But if it's only 2 steps, and it's highly likely some very toxic stuff can be carried over into the API. There are some issues with impurity control. Based on the risk, we might recommend PI. But as BJ indicated, normally we do not look at the starting material, but that is not a one-size-fits-all answer.
Thank you.
Microphone number 2, please. Step right up close.
So this is DMF ANDA related. So the DMF holder has an API that is, they say it's EP. The EP has impurity levels. The USP for that same product doesn't have impurity levels. If FDA comes and says, okay, I want you this particular impurity at 1.0, but EP says 1.5, and the DMF holder is going to stick to that 1.5. If the ANDA company changes their spec for 1.0 and has, say, a customer spec to the DMF holder, is that okay, or is FDA DMF going to go back to the DMF holder and say, no, you have to go with what we want, even though it's not in the USP, but it is EP? Did you follow that?
There is agency has a new map. I think it just came out. It's a draft map, and this is an opportunity for you to comment on the draft. Because agency's current thinking is The USP monograph or any limits above ICH should be qualified, justified. So that is where it stands at this point, and this new draft just came out about a couple of months ago.
Sorry, it's map 5017.2, but it to some degree addresses this concern. And I think the concern is that USP monographs as well as EP monographs, it's not quite transparent if there's safety data to support the impurity limits that are there. So instead, the map basically says that we will move forward with enforcing levels per ICH limits.
But will you deny the approval of the ANDA because the DMF holder is not going to go down to the level that you want, but the ANDA holder will? So it's the ANDA holder's risk that they will or will not get the API in at that level. So will that hold up the approval? Will you make the DMF holder change their spec to that lower limit?
I haven't encountered that. Have you, Ram? Where the DMF has to be adequate for the ANDA to be approved, but I don't. So I don't know if DMF review would impose that.
Again, a chicken story here. But DMFs are reviewed in the context of ANDA, and all your drug substance information is sitting in the DMF. So you're not really decoupling the DMF and ANDA. You see, so your specs in the ANDA are coming from the DMF. Unless you do a certain process in your ANDA to show that how you are mitigating that risk, or you are doing an extra step, crystallization or purification or something, to ensure that it will meet the proposed specifications.
I think microphone 2 has a comment on the chicken or the egg.
Well, yeah, I just wanted to maybe get some clarification on that and maybe reword the question. If it was pretty clear, I thought, but in any event, if the ANDA holder sets acceptance criteria for the API material coming in that meets the requirements of FDA and ICH and USP and EP, whatever, but they're taking a business risk in that they look at the C of A from the vendor and it doesn't meet their requirements, they either have to deal with that with the API vendor or they need to throw away the material and not use it. Would that not be acceptable to the FDA as long as the ANDA acceptance criteria meet the requirements?
I think in principle
that is acceptable because basically the agency holds the applicant responsible for the submission. The DMF is the provider. You should work with the provider to make sure the material they provide meet your expectations. Whether the agency will accept the proposal or not, we will look at the detail. For example, first, what is the acceptance specification from the ANDA? Second, what's the testing responsibilities? Are you going to test every single batch, or you're going to receive it based on COA and just periodically verify their COA? So if you commit to conduct every single batch of incoming materials to meet your specifications, personally, I do not see why we cannot accept it. So it all depends on the quality agreement between you and your supplier.
Okay, let's go ahead and move on to an online question. And we'll come back here.
This is for Dr. Ram. Do we need to include facility used for characterization of drug substance on Form 356H?
Yeah.
Facility? Is that what?
Can you repeat the question, please?
The testing facility should be on 356H. anything that has to do with drug substance manufacture, processing, testing, intermediate facilities, they should be on 356H.
Ram, I think they're asking about characterization, which usually is not included because it's an R&D. You know, it's the R&D who characterizes drug substance. So I think the question was on characterization, not testing.
So just to 356H should include all the facilities for the commercial operation. As discussed by Derek this morning, you can include any other one-time testing facilities or something that's not proposed for commercial operations in Module 3 for further information for the reviewers.
Okay. Microphone number 1.
Hi, this is Venkat. My question is regarding the legal entity name changes, how that should be communicated to the project management office. As companies go through mergers and acquisition, there is a change in legal entity name change or ownership. How is it communicated?
You can submit a correspondence for transfer of ownership or name change to the project manager.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Microphone number 2, please.
Yeah, thousands of questions, but I'll try to stick to one. The one thing that Ram I was going to talk about is when you mentioned M7 and the question is that almost all the time we are seeing that even if the M7 very clearly talks about how long the product can be used, if it's a chronic product or it's used for a short time, and you can use your, set your limits of the PGs and Gs based on that. But we are seeing that, it's true about the drug product too, but also the API group is, DMF group is kind of hesitant and pushing it to 1.5 micrograms, even though it may be a product that people don't use more than 12 days. And, again, I know that when I was there, when we talked about this, I remember M7 was not finalized, but the decision was once it's finalized, we'll look at this. But I'm not seeing that a lot. So could you comment on where we are with that?
So when we get a justification from the holder about the time of use, we consult it out to DCR. And once we get their input, we kind of communicate, or our deficiencies basically are based on what we hear from DCR.
Oh, okay. So it's coming from the clinical. Thank you.
Okay, an online question, please.
This question is for Anh Bui. For PASs, what are the criteria for qualifying for priority review?
So if you request for priority review, you need to, so there's a map, the priority map. So if you meet the criteria within the prioritization map and you submit a priority request, we will review and evaluate the request and issue a response to you, whether you be granted or not.
Okay. Microphone number 1, please.
Hi. I have another PGI question. We have an impurity that's genotoxic positive, and based on the PDE limit, the maximum allowable is 1.5 ppm. But in the historical lots, it's below 0.3, which is even below the 30%. So should it need a spec, or if it needs a spec, can the manufacturer set at 1.5 ppm? Or should they go below 0.3?
I think it's difficult to talk about a specific example. You should provide your justification and let the review team and the review bench look at the justification and provide you with an appropriate answer. You could also send it as a ask questions for DMF, and they can guide you.
Because the dilemma here is the ANDA is going to be approved. If they propose 0.3 and if FDA doesn't agree, it has to go through another review period to go back and, say if they propose 1.5 and if FDA doesn't agree, then they will get another deficiency asking it to set it at 0.3, which means it's going to delay the ANDA approval. So, it's a
again, it is a specific example, and you are giving me multiple scenarios. You are telling me that lifetime, based on the lifetime use, it's 1.5 microgram, and then you are going into different scenarios. So I think the best approach is to propose this justification and propose the spec and let FDA review it.
I would add to that, we're not supposed to, from an ANDA perspective, we set specifications based on clinical relevance, or at least that's how we're supposed to do it, not process capability. So if the process is achieving 0.3 ppm, essentially, you're saying, but the limit for genotoxicity would be 1.5, then as long as the farm tox data you have support the 1.5, then that's what you'd be able to set a specification limit for.
Microphone number 2, please.
This is Subraj. This question is to Ram, and particularly the question is clarifying questions that the gentleman asked the first question, which is the skip testing of the PGA impurities in the drug substance. He said their drug substance batches are 30% below the TTC. And then the DMF asked to put the skip testing on the drug substance. And then the following question for the ANDA product. So is that the practice at least we had before, saying that if the DMF holder shows like a 10 or 15 batches of the drug substance continuously, saying that we are below the 30% of TTC of that impurity. So at that point, the DMF holder can ask the DMF review division saying that my drug substance doesn't have this impurity for 10, 15 batches, and the DMF division will give, okay, we'll agree that one, accept that one, there is not there, so no need of skip testing. That way, the ANDA team don't have to ask the question, why don't you put that impurity, is that the practice still there or not there? Last 9 months, I can put it that way. We had a good practice. We usually do that. If you show us 10 batches, 10, 15 batches, we say, okay, it's not there below 30% TTC. We'll let you do that one. So,
I think you were asking about the post-adequate amendment, and I think you.
No, it's not the post-adequate. Even during the review, they demonstrate like a 15 batches, something like that. So we usually give that one.
So again, this is a specific question, and without knowing all the assessment that went into it,
right? Again,
it's difficult to answer. But I think, and the second part of the question was a post-adequate. Once you have a sufficient amount of data for a given process, you could make an amendment and let the review division take a look at it.
No, I know that, because it all depends on how far your starting material with the drug substance. If it's multiple steps, we usually do that. But if it's only 1 or 2 steps, of course we don't do that.
I'm gonna interrupt this because, again, especially for those of you that used to work at the agency and used to talk about all, we're not here. This panel is not capable of making final decisions for the agency on very specific instances. They can talk generally about the guidances and how things should be done. If you have a very specific question about a specific situation, all right, and we'll take that up after the panel because we've only got 6 minutes left, and I know we've got over 27 questions from people online. Could I have my next online question, please?
This was directed towards Nguyen Bui. After IRs have been responded to, and the review team has no more questions, can we still expect a no comment DRL?
I'm glad that had a lid on it.
Do you mind repeating the question, please? The first part?
After IRs have been responded to and the review team has no more questions, can we still expect a no comment DRL?
It depends on the timing. I'm not sure which IR the person who's asking the question is referring to, but if we haven't gotten to the mid-cycle date yet, then if there's no further comments, we'll be issuing a no comments DRL at that time.
Okay, microphone number 1.
Yeah, Keith with Perigo. If a company, an ANDA applicant, has a storage facility or warehouse separate from the manufacturing facility, should that be listed on the 356H form, or should it be listed in Module 3, or is that not necessary to list that at all?
If it's a part of commercial operations, I would list it on the 356H and the Module 3. Both. Yeah.
Next online question, please.
In relation to review of the ANDAs that reference DMFs, for DMFs that are currently in the paper format, how does one submit responses to questions on the DMF in the Ectd format post May 5th? Any guidance on this, please?
So it's only, or they want to submit an amendment. The amendments that should come in after May 5th, they all come in electronic format. I don't know what was the other part of the question.
Can you repeat the question for us, please?
So it's about questions. Should questions or responses to questions, should they be in Ectd format, and then that was it, post May 5th?
Response to questions. Responses to the questions?
For DMFs.
Oh, that will be an amendment, so it should come electronically.
Okay. Microphone number 1.
Yeah, my question is to Robert. We understand that there are some specific CMC guidances wherein the agency is very clear about conducting the elemental impurities and extractable leachables testing. But there are low risk dosage forms like oral solution dosage form, and in spite of that, identifying it as a low risk, the agency has been asking to conduct that study. So what is the agency's approach in identifying this kind of studies and recommending to the applicants?
As I mentioned, OLDP for generic drug product quality review, it's organized based on dosage form, and so at this point, each of the individual branches within OLDP, as they start to look more into extractables and leachables, they are evaluating according to their own practice. So I'm not familiar with the oral solutions and how they're evaluating that, but internally they should be doing so consistently.
Microphone number 2.
Yeah. I wasn't very precise, I think, in my last question, and I appreciate your answer, that if the warehouse or storage facility is part of the manufacturing process, and we list it in both. If it's post-manufacturing, so it's a drug product, like we bring in product from another country, it's stored at this facility, finished product prior to distribution. That's really what I'm asking about. Where would we list that?
It still falls under your company, though, correct? Yes, so it should still be listed before you distribute it. Should still be listed on the 356H in Module 3.
Next online question, please.
Now this is for Mr. Berendt, Dr. Berendt. If the drug manufacturer used API manufactured under the same company but at different locations, does the DP manufacturer need to conduct any test for the API again?
Right, so my understanding is that it's a single DMF, a single route of synthesis, but 2 different manufacturing sites for the drug substance. And I guess I can't get clarification on that, but this will be potentially a risk-based decision. At minimum, what will be required is that you supply multiple COAs for drug substance manufactured at each of the sites to demonstrate comparability and sameness of the drug substance manufactured by both sites. And then based, again, on the risks associated with the drug product, you may be requested to supply drug product batches manufactured with that additional drug substance. But again, sorry, without more information, I wouldn't be able to tell for sure.
All right, and one last question from online.
This is for Jennifer. Is the FDA Form 3674 required with the ANDA to confirm that a bioequivalent study was registered on clinicaltrials.gov?
For that, I will be the appropriate person to. I'm not sure I'd be the appropriate person to answer that question.
Which is a perfect segue to end it on. Because if any of you didn't get your questions answered, and I know we had a lot of questions online that we did not have time to get to, I apologize for that. CDER SBIA at fda.hhs.gov. Now, before we wrap up, I'd like to invite the person who's the program manager for this, for the SBIA events, to say some closing remarks and to thank our panel. Brenda.